The second day of quarterfinals. Yes. Such a good day. Really good. Anywho. Hi, this is Vision Denial. I'm Sam. This is our Daily Sweepers, where I take some dramatic readings of the notes I take for International World Championships for every day that there's a World Championship game. This is super simple. Couple of things. My other Daily Sweepers, other than the one that was posted yesterday, had very simplified notes about the one game or the few games that were fairly simple. For these best of fives, I thought it would be better to go in depth, so these are going to be longer takes for each of the games themselves. I hope this is, well enjoyed. Otherwise, other things to note on the bottom over here, I put in highlights. The highlights have been done by the VCS. The VCS are fantastic. Go check them out. We haven't had them in an international competition in the last couple of years, but they are a superb league. Do give them the chance and support them. Today was Edward Gaming versus Royal Never Give Up. And you know what? Today was freaking dope. RNG having the top seed and EDG having the bottom seed is a little funny, considering how EDG is the top seed of their region, RNG are the bottom seed of their region, or the third seed of the region. But that doesn't, nobody pays too much mind to that, as this game was expected to be hype. Some people leaning into RNG, some people leaning into EDG. So how did it turn out? Well, let's take a look as we head to our first game, where RNG having seed selection, choose red side, and EDG choose or get blue side. Let's look into the draft. EDG's round 1 bans, being Gragas, Galio, and Yumi, plan on eliminating disengage and re-engage, would suggest that heavy team fights and neutral objectives are their focus. RNG, on their hand, eliminating Lee Sin, Twisted Fate, and LeBlanc, seem to want to avoid skirmishes and side lane plays, and that suggests that they are also aiming equally for neutral objectives, but also on siege. For their round 1 picks, EDG having Lucian, Nami, and Jarvan, aim for bot lane side win condition that needs to get going fairly early to help stack Drakes off the start of the game. RNG, on their end, with Aphelios, Ryze, and Jin Zhao, has some team fighting option and disengage, but nothing solidly formed in terms of a win condition at this point. RNG's round 2 bans look to stop any strong solo lanes. Again, considering the round 1 bans, adding Graves and Zoe to the mix helps stop any particular aim at side lane pressure or any type of skirmish that would arise. EDG, on their end, banning Lulu and Thresh, are aiming to hurt their bot side, trying to get rid of any ease for Aphelios to lane, and end up mostly focusing on that. EDG's round 2, round out the composition with some fairly difficult engage, adding Malzahar and Jace, which suggests that they would more want to help with some neutral setups and aim around picks and herald pressure, and also still aim for the Drakes. This is more reinforcing what had been expected from the round 1. There should seem some confusion as to LS saying that Malzahar should 1v9 in this situation, in which case I would say how. It would be hard to enter this range, considering how RNG round out their composition with Nautilus and Aurelia, who, in their end, would gain a substantial 1-3-1 style composition that has some awkward team fighting, but incredibly strong wave management and some good long distance engage. It may be awkward, but it is long distance. With that, we head into the game. EDG's level 1 warding top with JJ starting bot side seems like they'll be aiming for Jace focus instead of enabling their bot side. And RNG ended up benefiting from it, giving them excellent vision and jungle tracking. Both teams playing passively for lane so far. No huge moves, but the lane difference and vision control and denial allows the first Drake on spawn timer for RNG. EDG are also playing with some solid vision control, but are second to any given play into any opportunity, which means that they'll be slower to every given play when doing so. Now, EDG end up catching out some sloppy movement, use their strong early game skirmish and punish to get first blood, but Shahu is the stronger laner and gets the solo kill, helping nullify the mistake altogether for RNG, and that allows them to secure the first Herald. Both teams drafting towards neutral plays and skirmishes. It's telling that the direction of the game when gold is tied, because at this point RNG had every neutral heading into the 11-minute mark, and as the 11-minute mark hits, EDG fail a dive and trade kills, allowing RNG to use the Herald bot side for first turret and another Drake, leaving RNG with solid control of the pace of the game going into the mid-game transition. Now, this is important primarily because the fact that both of these teams had drafted towards some neutral objective contests, whichever team has the most amount of neutral objectives means that they will have priority every single time and control of the pace. And given that RNG were taking advantage of every mistake done by EDG at this point, allowed them to have full control of every aspect of this game. Now, EDG has had a very hard time keeping up with the pace and the vision control, as RNG's map movements and vision denial is very efficient with the lead that they've accrued. But they are answering map pressure while avoiding to opt into any poor engages. As such, RNG are forcing the issue and taking advantage of their vision lead to make riskier engages. They are confident that will work out, and, it does. EDG are creating pick opportunities, and it looks good at first to try to stop the soul point take. But RNG with pace and gold lead force a re-engage in a choke point of a jungle, while they have a stronger 5v5 option, allowing them to secure the soul point at a 17 minutes and giving them access to 100% of the neutrals pre-20 minutes. EDG are now pivoting into a 1-4 and 1-3-1 fairly early to answer the likely pressure they'll face with this deficit and pressure loss. And with it, RNG are then pivoting to using their jungle and support duo to create the lane that will become the 3-man of their 1-3-1 much faster than EDG, which, given the Nautilus and Jin Zhao, is a solid engage and skirmish to add for any of the 3 carries that they had drafted at this point. Now, EDG are working hard to set up a future Drake to stop Soul and have a solid fight from it, but getting 4-for-1 at a loss of this fight, as the Soul was stolen by Wei and the top turret was lost from the pressure. The EDG get a win fight, but they lose Soul, they lose turret, and they lose a lot of the lane pressure that they had. So EDG take this team fight win and go for Baron, but unfortunately the death timers are too small, and they realized they wouldn't be able to keep control of the pit with that particular scenario. Following a series of traded skirmishes and picks, RNG held a stronger setup for Baron and can secure it now with a 5k lead. Every neutral, Soul, Baron, and we enter the late game transition with RNG just needing to break the base to keep pressure up. And heading into that game, they managed to break the base, one inhibitor turret, and another exposed, and RNG reset with 3.8k Baron power play. And while EDG are actively trying to rush an Elder setup, they get punished for it. 4 dead to nothing, RNG push towards the close, having a full control of everything during this game. And with it, RNG go 1-0. EDG seem to want to play for team fights, and as such, they should look to draft for more options that would have solid 5v5 as opposed to some disjointed skirmishes, as it left them with some weak options. I would also like for them to focus on their early game towards the win condition. They drafted, especially Gervin in the early game, instead of looking to mitigate their opponent's stronger player. Early game risky aggression could have turned ugly for RNG, but the solid setups that they had for neutral objectives made up for so much of the risks being taken, especially when they are first to the play every time. There are some team fight mistakes that happened that would have been devastating if not for the lead they had, but those are minor given this situation. And with that, we head into game 2, where EDG, having side selection, decided to opt in to blue side, and RNG are on red. We take the draft in this situation. The round 1 EDG ban suggests that they want to avoid team fights and any type of zoning, i.e. specifically the Jarvan, the Lucian, and the Galio usually end up having good picks towards their strong suits and zone their carries most of the time given team fights. While RNG banned the same thing again for the second game. This seems to be a trend that they'll be aiming. A lot of these two teams are going to be banning similar things over again, and mostly as a response to things that are left over. And this is not a bad choice to do. I have complained before about lack of adaptability, but there is going to be quite a bit of adaptability that round 1 bans staying the same, when especially if you're a red side and the winning team, is not a huge deal. The round 1 picks for EDG suggest that they're looking for some sieging and transitions into some engage after they've poked. Going for Ryze, Yuumi, and Ezreal. Yuumi and Ezreal are fairly mobile and good at poking, while Ryze has some solid wave management. And both of these, and this trio is very good at helping enable dives afterwards, or any engages after they've done a solid amount of poking or any wave management. RNG have a similar idea with the front line, however, that's better at zoning. Misfortune and Jace do have good wave clear management in terms of ultimates. It is fairly picky and a little bit harder to navigate compared to a Ryze. But given the fact that they have a Jhin Zhao, they have a lot more zoning capability, and it is much easier to turn on a dime to then dive. RNG on the round 2 bans are banning off Poppy and Malphite in an attempt to stop any and all engages that could work very well with this composition. Stopping those kinds of engages is fairly noticeable, because if they want to be able to use the siege to turn, then strong engages is necessary. EDG, on their hand, do the same thing, where they're banning strong engages, but these engages are from the support side and benefit specifically the laning options. And so they do a twofold effective kind of ban where they essentially make it harder for Misfortune to do any type of laning. Gala would have a harder time at this point. And with this, EDG round up their round 2 picks with some strong early options, showing that they aim more around poking around neutral objectives instead of just sieging and then making sure that Viper can be left alone, as the 4-man usually would fight on their own without the Ezreal. RNG for the round 2 round out with a surprise Annie pick with Alistar, giving some strong roaming to everything, and still have a lot of engagement options. They would have probably a stronger priority over the neutral objectives, which will put a hamper on EDG's win conditions. With that, we head into the game. RNG at this point from the early game had played fairly defensive with some good early vision and looking to avoid any of the strong jungle skirmishes that EDG would have drafted on their end thanks to the Olaf. The vision advantage from EDG but given this, EDG do nothing with it for a little bit. Now, the vision advantage from EDG in a stronger early game jungle pressure still allow them to gain a double scuttle, which foreshadows some of the interactions that we will see to come in this game. Early game showing each role is winning, and RNG are having a hard time creating picks and ganks to answer the bleeding leads that the laning phase from EDG has garnered at this point. Now, because of a land of a bunch of failed ganks from RNG, EDG try to go for the first Drake, and even if it's a failed first Drake and stolen by Wei, EDG seem to show that they have a strong control over what is going on in terms of this game. Granted, this is followed by a sloppy but a successful dive, and with it, EDG are now in the lead at 7 minutes with 2k. Now, EDG, with a much better neutral fight following this, and a better team fight setup overall, use a Realm Warp super well at this early Herald fight to win this particular team fight and secure it. And this was much more proactive and much better off of them at this point. And with this 4k lead that is used incredibly well, they create pressure everywhere on the map, and that helps Viper get the first turret, and it allows him to gain the gold necessary for him to be left to his own devices, allowing for that Ezreal is good at staying in the mid lane or in the side lane, farming what is necessary, and for the rest of the 4 to be able to contest any particular team fights with no particular worry and be able to transition from that. Now, RNG attempts at picks are fairly punished and answered at either spots, either at the spot or cross map at any given point. And as we enter the 14-minute mark and mid-game transition, EDG are in strong control, but they're allowing a little bit too many mistakes at this point. Now, these are some of the moments where gold lead does more than the stupid decisions the players make. JJ and Flandre playing far too forward and getting punished for it. RNG end up trading down, however, because EDG can just turn around, get kills back, as well as other points of control around the map. RNG end up scraping control in some aspects, but are mostly acting on missed positions, while they should be aiming for something a little bit more proactive. And as I type this, they punish again, and EDG keep mispositioning and giving up stuff that doesn't need to be given up. If this continues, RNG will grab back control. It will be a while, as it is still a 7k lead for EDG, and they can't grab any turrets for map control. Oops. As I typed that, RNG end up winning a 4v5, and Xiaohu was able to split push, grabbing 2 turrets from it. It shrinks the gold from 7 to 5k. And I think EDG recognized this, make a risky call with some very sloppy setup towards the Baron, but end up managing to secure it. And all this game, all the while, Drakes have been in the background of things, with none of the teams having any leads for whichever direction. which shows that this will be either uh, a slow game as we enter, like this might be a slow game as we enter the late game transition, or that dragons don't have any importance in terms of the win conditions. Now, EDG using this Baron do so properly and calmly break the base and collect the leads that they do, avoiding any misposition and gather 4.2k from the power play. They'll need to use this mid pressure to have a stronger Drake setup and suffocate any goal. Now, EDG aren't designed for strong siege in this particular case. Unfortunately, they could have had a stronger siege with it, but given the Olaf and the Graves, their sieging options tend to be fall flat without any extra stuff. They tend to do great in wave clear management, but Ezreal's being the only poke. But given the pressure that they had from the mid and hip being down, they break the bot turret and take one of the risky engagements, one of the riskiest engages to close out the game. And it probably would have killed their entire tempo and leveraged some stuff forward to RNG, but given their wallet difference, the game ends up with a 5-for-3 trade for EDG, and EDG end up winning out the game, going 1-1. Now, this could have been an EDG loss, and as such, I want them to be more aware of their positioning and vision lines, since that is what really killed the tempo of the game. And it could have ended the game much sooner given the lead that they had. Their composition was fine for the most part, especially for team fighting. It was much better in terms of the options that were available to them. But mostly being that far forward requires much more sustain. If they want to do that, they would have to pick some sustainable options. RNG have a fairly creative draft that was not executed properly. Focusing solely on mid when your strength lends itself on roams from the trio support, jungle, and mid lent itself to a much harder approach to the early neutrals and team fights. I know that some of the analysts just described it as the fact that the early gank from Andy with a flash trying to stun did not pull through, is what caused Andy to not properly be able to roam. But I think that the lack of focus on making sure that Alistar can be freed from the lane made it harder for Alistar to also assist. Imagine 3 people actually going in there makes it easier for Andy to roam at that point. Now, having the move speed but not the priority means that the win conditions were approached or practiced well enough. RNG should probably draft for something that they practiced a little more. With that, we head into game 3, where RNG have side selection and have decided to go blue side, and EDG go red. So we head into draft. For the round 1 bans, RNG take out the Yuumi and break up what is usually the avoidance of any particular skirmish and side lanes, not ever letting LeBlanc for EDG at any given point during this series. Which tells me that they're usually trying to focus on avoiding that kind of team fight options that usually EDG would have. And EDG, at this point, sticking to, on the red side, stopping any particular side lane and skirmishing. This died instead of, RNG banning the LeBlanc. EDG on the red side will still ban the Twisted Fate and the Lee Sin, but ban Rise with it as well. It seems like neither team likes how the map is played and is trying to limit those options. Round 1 picks, RNG picks a fairly flexible core with no solid lock into any role at this point, other than the jungle for Xin Zhao, but it still does allow with some good re-engage options. Putting Lucian and Galio allows a lot of triple flex virtually. EDG, however, being more concrete with their Graves, Aphelios, and Olaf, have some fairly good scaling and team fighting options, but haven't quite rounded out to guarantee that that's what they're aiming for. They do aim, however, to use the Olaf to keep control of the early game again. Round 2 bans from EDG, banning out the Ziggs and the Nami, suggest that they want to focus pressure on the bot side of the map and want to play more towards some sieging with the Aphelios, who at this point would be a better option for that. Round RNG, however, are trying to limit any of the power that Aphelios would have, taking out the Thresh, or any other pick option by taking out the Zoe. This makes it a lot harder for either side to be able to make strong picks for what's going on. For the round 2 picks, RNG show a strong focus on wanting to do a 1-4 team fighting, i.e. have the Lucian at the top lane and having picked Misfortune Rakan, having Misfortune, MF, Rakan, Galio, and Jin Zhao is a strong 4 composition with a lot of re-engage and ability to disperse a lot of damage while allowing Lucian to either come back delayed and clean up, or have him keep pressure on the top side. However, this will require that Lucian is ahead of the clock so that Xiaohu can create that global pressure and be able to do so. EDG have a stronger answer and flexibility for the early game and solid scaling throughout, which can siege or play for neutrals or play for team fights with some conditional engages. It's not the strongest engage in the world to use just the Azir wall, but it is a much better long-range set of tools with a good amount of re-engage sustainability and can create a lot more pressure. RNG would need control early or could just fall behind the entire time. And then we head into the game, where RNG invading early gets some fairly good vision that is answered equivalently by EDG. These tend to be the norm at this point, where invades don't lead to very much other than some vision control. RNG this game already playing to their win condition at the 3-minute marks, diving topside and guarantee Xiaohu has the lead, while their bot side plays defensively not allowing any answers to come through. And with it, RNG will keep their TP advantage with everything that's going around. Now, EDG do have better lane matchups in the mid and bot lane, which tend to be equalizing any of the leads. And that means that RNG do need to focus on this lead. And as I typed this, they repeated the gank to the top side, allowing for a lot of the plates to go to Xiaohu. Now, JJ recognizes they'll have a priority bot, grab an early Drake for EDG, and the side effect of all of the other lanes winning is that they all get the priority to roam. And as such, they stop RNG from getting a Herald that usually would have been theirs, and then proceed to swap lanes to mitigate any leads that Xiaohu would have queued from RNG. And with the short lane swap, EDG made RNG find themselves having a hard time ballooning the lead. And as we enter the mid-game transition at 11 minutes, RNG had not done enough to bolster the lead that they would have gotten with Xiaohu. EDG opting into any skirmish and team fights and trading up or even allowing them to gain small leads and pressure is a pretty huge failure on RNG. Unfortunately from them, they have yet to do anything to balloon Xiaohu to guarantee their win condition. On the other side, they realized that Gala had been passively garnering enough gold to help contest and stop the leads that EDG had secured on the bot side, and then end up getting a trade of Drakes for them. Now, EDG might have over-focused on slowing down Xiaohu. They have Herald, but Viper doesn't have the momentum he needs, and at this point, you end up with a solid fight around the river, which allows to get 2 turrets and answer for the first turret for Shahu. These notes are not as clear as I hoped they were. EDG end up getting a solid fight around the river and then end up getting 2 turrets, which is an answer for the first turret that Shahu secured for himself, showing that RNG sadly need to either move towards Shahu or they'll be down in members at any given point. Now, EDG make a similar mistake and split the team while under a TP advantage, or while under a TP disadvantage. Now, I haven't talked about the vision in this game yet, so let's do a quick vision check. RNG have some solid vision, but it's fairly shallow. It only does as much as track when to punish EDG. And while EDG are struggling to keep up vision, theirs is still slightly more aggressive, and coupled with some good vision denial, give them a better idea of the information in play. EDG have been playing a better neutral setup also overall during this game. RNG being stuck behind the pace as their win condition in the 1-4 Lucian comp, not being ahead enough to contest any vision, has started to ramp up. And ED has started to ramp up the deficit as EDG keeps pushing the issue at hand. And as we enter the late game transition at 24 minutes, EDG ends up with a 3.5k lead, which is not huge given at this point of the game and how the rest of the series have gone. Now, EDG with some solid neutral setup and vision control around the Baron end up faking it out and securing Soul Point, and RNG have had to use a TP to gain nothing at that point. It seems like EDG, now that they have this particular good amount of control, are pulling them around the map. It's just unfortunate that Flandre keeps overextending, and because he keeps getting caught, why is EDG keeps mispositioning this way? It kills all of the momentum they built up. Now, despite the lack of map control, RNG are keeping up well in vision, allowing them options to create skirmishes and picks. But given the gold deficit and the sustain and disengage that EDG have, it is difficult to secure kills or any pressure at all. RNG, like the previous game, are relying on mistakes from EDG, and if it comes down to it, it should be hard to pull off. Now, RNG do try to bait a Baron play, and with the sloppy setup, they end up losing it to JJ, who just walks up to it and smites. And technically, it walks up, flash and smites, but it should never have gotten to that point. The fight that follows is traded equally, but Viper and Mako being alive under the Aphelios and Lulu can just force RNG off and then end up securing the Dragon Soul. This mistake balloons the lead to 6.5k, and Viper has just been given all of the tools at this point as part of the win conditions to help close out this game. However, EDG are not patient. And again, Flandre just dies, and it breaks the entirety of the momentum while in the base. Now, they still end up breaking the base, and they end up getting 3.2k Baron lead from it. And at least at this point, RNG are playing a little bit more aggressively. And they're probably assessing that EDG are so frequently out of position that they end up being able to, at some point, as a flank up from the bottom side river into the mid lane, pick off Flandre and Viper to win a fight and slow the game down. The fact that EDG allows this happening so often is not a good sign. It's good to see that this is a proactive play from RNG, and it's good that they're not trying to focus solely on very explicit mistakes. EDG needs to double down on vision play. RNG at this point, though, at the 36 minutes mark, risks a Baron play that's sloppily set up again. And JJ actually walks up and steals the Baron, almost identically, with almost the identical setup. Flandre dying randomly slows the game down again, and what would have been a very easy close ends up being a very sloppy close from EDG. But they still do end up winning after having been gifted 2 Barons. EDG now are 2-1 at match point. EDG, you guys need to be more conscious of your vision, position, your limits, because your pace of the game dies so quickly and so much from all these positional errors around the map, especially across every stage of the game. And you will lose the game at some point, or at least you should if you play like this. That should be reeled in a little bit. Now, RNG played well to their composition, but didn't ban around the answers that could happen. Although draft was not the main cause of the loss here, an overview of that type of draft could help. If you want to play topside, the carry needs to be able to play around your team fight, or you need to properly set up side lane pressures. And then we head to Game 4, where RNG ended up with side selection and chose red side. So, we head to the draft. The round 1 bans, being Galio, Lucian, and Nautilus, suggest that they didn't really like how RNG had played the early game previously. They had done it too well, and they want to avoid any particular sideline picks or any skirmishes that would be benefited from doing that again. While RNG just do their standard, they want to avoid side lane skirmish bans, banning out the LeBlanc, the Twisted Fate, and the Lee Sin. It looks like we should never see the Twisted Fate or Lee Sin if you're on the blue side. Foreshadow! Heading off from that, from the round 1 picks, EDG gets some fairly solid power picks again. Having around the same kind of stuff to work around with from a different time, being on the blue side, they end up with some Rise, a Yumi, and Misfortune, which doesn't specifically scream Siege in the same way that the Ezreal does, but it has some fairly solid. It does have some very solid wave management from it. Combining the Rise and the Misfortune from it means that any particular dive and siege, if they do want to lean into that, is very much enabled thanks to it. RNG end up getting Annie again. And they say they want to team fight with some scaling. Now, at the round 2 bans, RNG just look to limit any of the potential answers that would be for Jarvan. Right? And anything that would be usually a good contest or answer towards setting up some strong neutral objectives. Taking away the Olaf and the Poppy means that it's harder for them to have any backline access towards the Aphelios or even be able to deny anything from the Poppy, allowing it to be easier for the Jarvan to navigate in the early game. EDG get rid of some strong engage. Getting rid of Rakan and Rel means that any type of extra engages that would benefit Annie and Aphelios can't happen. Now, despite Flandre's performance, he gets his Graves again. Ugh. And together with the Jhin, EDG take their round 2 picks and solidify both strong team fighting and then also a 1-3-1 option, showing that they're not necessarily looking to do sieging, but they're looking to sustain while moving around a 3 group and keeping wave management and pressure up. RNG on their end rounded out nicely with some Kennen and Lulu to make sure that they have some disengage, some sustain, and some hard engage that scales and is available to supplement the Annie and Aphelios, meaning that if they're going to look to play the top side, they'll have a top side that plays to their team fighting and is much more appropriate to the way that they played the early game. With that, the game starts. Solid level 1 from EDG forces Wei's flash, and it should help them gain some early jungle control and disrupt lanes from RNG. RNG, on their hand, respond well to this play with some good vision, but Gala overcommitting bot sides gets answered and punished. JJ with a double, making this early game even harder for Wei. This early laning phase is fairly wild, with Flandre roaming mid and all of the roles on the side of EDG just winning by a sizable amount. The onus at this point is on RNG to create some plays. And then as I type that, 5 members roam mid and grab a 2-for-1 dive. Now the blunder in the dive makes it so that any setup for Herald can't be guaranteed, but it can be contested. And this Herald is a mess. EDG set up terribly at this point, and Wade just ends up stealing it, almost like a cruel joke. But no kills resulted from this fight, and RNG end up regaining a 1k gold lead and tempo from it as we enter the mid-game transition around 11 minutes. Now, in this mid-game, RNG find their momentum and make sure the steps are followed properly to set up Drake. EDG wanting to stop a bot turret push and dive, overcommit, and choose to fight in a choke, losing 5-for-1. And that helps RNG gain the first turret and a much bigger lead to help create more picks as they keep getting extra picks. And finally, after all of that, they end up grabbing the first Drake at 15 minutes, suggesting that the win condition won't be Drake's this game. Flandre, without the gold lead, gets caught, and it causes RNG to gain way more momentum. And so the mistakes that EDG experienced during the games they did have a lead are starting to actually hurt them more than it is just inconveniencing them. EDG are finding avenues to trade where they can, but it's often trading down, which is a thing you want to avoid. Fantastic Vision is also dedicated by RNG with full information of the map at all times, while EDG focus on some shallow river vision and are still overcommitting towards plays that wind up trading down. Now, this is a fairly relevant note because river vision is usually done for neutral setups, but if it's only river vision for the neutral setups, it does end up with a lack of information, especially if there's not a proper set of vision denial, or if your opponents have much deeper, more aggressive vision and they're able to track you at a more efficient rate. Now, Flandre, despite this gold deficit, is still split pushing super deep as Graves. And it's really weird. RNG have found solid ways to balloon this lead, but haven't broken their tier 2 lines yet at 22 minutes, and so that's a little bit behind the pace of what you would usually expect, and that's not a good sign. Any plays EDG tries to make at this point is answered right away by RNG, making sure that they win fights. And given the deficit, EDG are just having a hard time being proactive in general. The coordination out of RNG in this game is superb. And as slow as the game is, RNG do keep up the vision and don't overforce. They should be a little bit more active, but this is fairly clean at 6.5k of a lead as we enter the late game transition at 24 minutes. And then the 25-minute hits, Drake neutral setup leads to 3 clean kills. RNG secure an easy Baron and let EDG stop Soul Point as they can't do much with it. Finally being able to finish off tier 2 lines, RNG with a solid Baron dive mid, break the inhib, and close the game so cleanly. And with that, RNG go 2-2 for Silver Scrapes. Nice. RNG do exactly what is asked and put a stronger team fighting option for Shahu. And if they keep up this form, I have like one minor complaint, and that's the proactivity is a little lacking. And if you give EDG this many opportunities to attack, they will eventually find that flip every time. be more proactive, and it should nip this whole series in the butt. EDG, if Flandre is going to split push, lean more into him doing so, improve the vision in that direction, avoid making lopsided fight when he's away, or at least put him on something that requires him to group. RNG seemed to recognize this weakness, and while the overcommitment is not exclusively to him, much of what fails in the engagement is the lack of coordination between the 4 on the bot side and Flandre on his own. And as we enter Silver Scrapes and head to Game 5, EDG with a side selection decide to stay on the blue side, and RNG are now on the red side. EDG for the round 1 bans out the Annie and the Lucian. Let's go. Banning out the solo laners just completely. They don't want Cryin, they don't want Xiaohu to do any coordination on the top side at all, forcing them to play anything else, just anything else. Just anything else. RNG on the red side finally banning Aphelios, and still take off any side lane options. But the Twisted Fate, but the Lee Sin goes through. And this was a red herring, just completely. For the round 1 picks, this is definitely interesting. EDG end up securing Yuumi again, and with the Yuumi, Ezreal, and Ryze, you end up with again another sieging option, which is a sieging and poke option is 100% what EDG wanted. It is the core that ended up getting them the win in Game 2. But they end up letting RNG get the Lee Sin, which is available for the first time, and now have a fairly solid skirmishing core with Misfortune, Nautilus, and Lee Sin. It allows for them to, and you would expect from this core for them to go towards the bot side, but the round 2 picks suggest otherwise. In the round 2, RNG bans out some options that would help contest neutrals and enable dives, which are super necessary for the core that is built off from EDG. Banning Poppy and Olaf, which are fantastic tower divers in their rights, and like in the previous game, would help with any neutral objectives or any particular teamfight engages. Getting rid of those removes an entire headache for Lee Sin. Now, EDG continued to ban out Xiaohu and Cryin because they're like, we're not having it. They banned out the Malzahar, they banned out the cannon. They decided that round 2 was going to be completely dedicated for Xiaohu and Cryin. Well, let's get rid of anything that would usually enable any particular skirmish picks or any large-scale team fights. Which, at this point, if this is where you're recognizing a lot of the wins are going for them, go for it. Round 2, Flandre gets his graves again. And then they round it out with a Jarvan, showing that they do indeed want to siege. You know, just poke them and dive them. Just do it. But it will require that they have control over a lot of the early heralds. RNG on their side decide, skirmish is the game to win, and Xiaohu is the name of the game. That analogy did not work. They give Xiaohu Gwen, which means that they'll have to focus topside. As much as the core indicates that they'll want to do bot side play and get early drakes, if Gwen does not get any of the early leads, any particular impact she's going to have for the rest of the game is going to be nil. Like, absolutely useless. Not going to work. And they do need it so that they can make sure that the group of 4 is able to do any neutral setups and contests while allowing them to have the side lane pressures. And then we just head into the game. It's make or break. As we head into this game, both teams are tracking the jungles very early. Everyone knows exactly which direction they're going to be going, and they're both going to be going bot side. RNG punished the over-aggressive play from EDG's duo and then ended up getting a 2v1 at a 2-for-1 at 3 minutes, helping stop any of the bleeding that was already happening from every lane. And what would have been worsened if left unattended completely. But despite the early mistake, EDG are playing the lanes much better still. And with it, they end up getting the priority for the first Drake, completely nullifying the point of having to play bot lane. And have complete river control throughout. Now, this control has given them full knowledge of Wei's positioning, and Viper ends up learning his lesson and retreat. They end up punishing Wei's position on his end. They win the fight. And EDG are just playing the map in this early game so much better than any of the 4 previous games. They're able to keep up solid neutral setups and temp control, and with all of this aggressive vision on top of it. Also, Wei's bizarrely getting caught out a lot. It's really killing any attempt at controlling the pace. Now, they have yet to also play towards the top side, creating this huge trough with Xiaohu now having zero presence or ability to help globally, and Flandre just outlaning him at any given point, which means that this Gwen and this Lee Sin now have become virtually ineffective. Now, EDG do recognize this, and they end up going to dive and give the first turret to Flandre, and this shuts Gwen down significantly more. RNG do get a Drake and answer from this play, but it's crumbs compared to everything else that has been happening and to the amount of control that EDG have going into this mid-game transition at 12 minutes and the 1.5k gold lead. Now, the survivability of Gala on this misfortune is not high, and when caught out, does not bode well for RNG, who have decided that misfortune was going to be their win condition instead of Gwen. The fight bot side shows exactly how much better the fight would have been for RNG if Gwen was the focus. Xiaohu had a great TP and position, did great damage, and unfortunately he did misplay this team fight. It wasn't enough damage, and he didn't focus on the right targets. But imagine if the gold lead had been more towards Gwen at this point, Xiaohu would have probably been able to enable his fighting a lot more, and the particular smaller mistakes would not have shown as much. But this is more what ifs. Now, because of it, at 15 minutes, EDG end up at a 5k gold lead and can just choose when fights happen, when turrets are taken, what drakes are theirs. Because of this deficit, RNG also have poor and shallow vision, and it's super easy for EDG to deny any particular information. Now, we just have to see if EDG can cleanly keep up the pressure and avoid overextending. EDG are being calm. They're being cool. They're being collected. Properly recognizing the vision and not extending when they shouldn't. And have superb wave management, guaranteeing their vision lines. EDG are also playing the poke and siege game very well. This is a totally different team from all the previous 4 games. It's like a league different from that. They have full control of the neutrals, the lanes, the vision. This is like a solid stomp from their end. And RNG are playing everything correctly on their end. But passive slow choke is still going to result in a loss. And some risk is going to be needed to get ahead at some point. As we enter the late game transition at 25 minutes, RNG finds an opening while they are 5v4 and Flandre is split pushing, but they're 7k down. And as I finish typing it, they are 8k down and Wei is caught, allowing EDG to claim the Baron, and then they end up being 9k down. Xiaohu in this position can only split push, and it doesn't help when there's no TP, and EDG have 5 Barons sieging bot side. The choices are not great for RNG, who need to commit to a fight or lose turrets to dives. And EDG sieging fantastically, find a dive opportunity, cleanly ace, and end the game with a fantastic close. And the vast majority of the mistakes from the previous games gone. And this decides the series, with EDG winning 3-2. So what are my thoughts from this? Well, despite the last game, EDG have proven one thing, that they are aggressive, they go. Flandre plays Graves a whole hell of a lot, but also gets caught out a lot, and that their vision is inconsistent, or at least their vision plays inconsistent. Whilst RNG is a much more consistent team, but they are lacking a lot of proactivity and tend to focus and lean into the mistakes that are being picked up. And so when the fifth game came down to it, and EDG decided that they're going to avoid the general mistakes that they made and were much more cautious and collected, I thought this was a done deal. 100% done deal. Now, a couple of things that some of the other teams might want to study from it is the ban choices are incredibly interesting. Mostly the round 1 red side bans, showing that like a lot of the times when they're on the blue side is specifically picked to gain emphasis on mid lane's ability to play around the map and to do side lane pressure. And it's super interesting that neither one of them got the chance to either play LeBlanc or Twisted Fate. That said, the LeBlanc being banned on red side was only done when RNG was on red side, and RNG recognized that, don't give EDG LeBlanc. Just don't do it, which is fair. That's 100% fair. With like the current lineup that they have at this point, with a Scout playing, and Scout being just on form. Mwah. I do want to point out though that in terms of if I was to do anything, we ended up with 88 champions now added in, with Andy being the new champion, and I would really hope that no new champions go in. I don't want Connor to be right. But the Andy is a surprising take for me. I super appreciate this Andy pick. I do think that is a fairly unorthodox in terms of everything that was there, but given the answers and how much that EDG tend to be caught out, RNG had solidly pegged an easy way to just punish. And so if other teams decide to adopt this similar strategy, I would not be surprised. Do I think EDG will probably win the next series? Well, they're playing off against whoever wins between Gen G and Cloud9. I would say yes. But depending on the form that Gen G and Cloud9 go in, I might change my mind. Both of those teams are very finicky and a little all over the place in terms of best of fives, and EDG and RNG are much stronger best of 5 teams. But given how much EDG had been punished, I don't think it's going to be that wild of a speculation to say that either of the winners from the next one could take one game, maybe 2 off of them, and really put it close. But at this moment, nothing convinces me that EDG will lose to the next series. They'll likely lose in the finals. I think that their hardest opponent at this point was going to be RNG, and everything else is a formality up until the finals, where either T1 or Damwon are likely to just really make them work for it and probably lose out. I don't know. Most of that is speculation from that point. There's nothing about the meta itself so far in these best of fives that seems to have drastically changed outside of this Annie pick, or like I guess the focus on solo lanes more than anything else. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments down below. Again, I appreciate all of you who do watch this. It's fantastic. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. We have tomorrow, if I remember correctly, it is Damwon versus Matt. Am I remembering that correctly? Tomorrow is... Yeah, it is Damwon versus Mad, where we're likely to see Damwon absolutely stomp, and I will be so excited to see that and talk about it. With that, I hope all of you have a great day, and I'll see you then tomorrow.